I sat in the lawyer's office, watching my brother Michael flip through documents with that same impatient look he'd worn since we were kids. Across the mahogany table, his wife Linda kept checking her phone. Neither of them had looked me in the eye since I'd arrived. 3 weeks earlier, Dad had collapsed in his workshop, the place where he'd spent 40 years building custom furniture. One moment he was laughing at something on the radio, sanding down a cherrywood cabinet someone had commissioned for their anniversary. The next moment, he was gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye, no chance to say the things you always think you'll have time to say later. The funeral had been small. Dad never wanted a fuss. But even in that chapel, I could feel the distance between Michael and me. He stood on one side with Linda and their kids, and I stood on the other. When people asked how we were holding up, Michael's answer was always the same. Practical concerns about the estate, the business, the property. Never about Dad. Never about the man who taught us both how to use a lathe, who spent Saturday mornings making us pancakes shaped like our initials, who never missed a single one of our baseball games, even when he had deadlines to meet. The truth? I'd moved back in with Dad 4 years ago, after my divorce. At 62, I wasn't exactly where I'd imagined I'd be. My marriage of 30 years had ended. My construction company had gone under during the recession, and Dad had offered me his guest room without a second thought. "Come home, Danny," he'd said on the phone. "The workshop's big enough for 2. Michael had called it charity. "You're living off Dad now?" he'd said during one awkward Thanksgiving dinner. "Some of us built our own lives, Danny." What Michael didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask, was that I'd spent those 4 years helping Dad keep the furniture business afloat. The orders had slowed down as Dad got older. His hands weren't as steady. His energy wasn't what it used to be. So I'd learned the craft from him, taken on more of the physical work, handled the customer service, managed the books. We'd become partners, really. Not just father and son, but 2 craftsmen working side by side. The night before Dad died, we'd stayed up late finishing a dining table for a young couple's first home. Dad had run his hand across the smooth surface and smiled. "You know, Danny, you've got a real gift for this. Better than I ever was at your age." "Come on, Dad. Nobody's better than you." "I'm serious." He'd looked at me then, really looked at me. "I'm proud of you, son. I know life threw you some curveballs, but you never stopped swinging. That takes guts." I'd gone to bed that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd found my footing again. 24 hours later, he was gone. Now, in the lawyer's office, Michael cleared his throat. "Can we get started? Some of us have to get back to work." The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Morrison, adjusted her glasses. She was probably in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and a calm, measured way of speaking that suggested she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. "Of course," she said. "I know this is a difficult time. Your father left very specific instructions about how this meeting should proceed." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Let me guess. The house goes to Danny because he was living there. Fine. We can work out the fair market value. Linda and I have already spoken with a realtor." "Michael?" Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. "Please, let me explain how your father wanted this handled." Something in her tone made the room go quiet.
Linda's phone stopped clicking. Michael's foot stopped tapping. "Your father," Patricia continued, "was very clear-minded until the end. He revised his will 6 months ago, and he asked me to make sure certain things were understood before we proceed with the formal reading." My stomach tightened. 6 months ago. That was around the time Dad had seemed different, more thoughtful. I'd caught him staring at old photo albums, writing in a journal late at night. The estate, Patricia said, consists primarily of the house, valued at approximately $420,000, and the furniture business, including the workshop, equipment, inventory, client list, and reputation. Combined, we're looking at roughly $650,000 in total assets. Michael sat up straighter. I could see him doing math in his head. However, Patricia said, and I heard the weight of that word, there are complications. The business has debts. Your father took out a loan 3 years ago to upgrade equipment and expand the showroom.
The remaining balance is $180,000. I knew about the loan. I'd been making the payments for the last 18 months, ever since Dad's Social Security wasn't quite covering everything anymore. But I'd never told Michael. It felt like admitting Dad needed help, and Dad had been so proud of his independence. So the net is really only $470,000, Linda said quickly. Split 2 ways, that's $235,000 each. We'll need to sell everything to settle the debts and divide the assets. That's not quite how your father saw it, Patricia said. She pulled out a folder, and I noticed her hands were steady, practiced. He left very specific instructions. Danny, your father wanted you to know something first. She slid a handwritten letter across the table to me. Dad's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Read it aloud, she said. He wanted Michael to hear this too. My hands trembled as I picked up the letter. The paper was thick, the kind Dad used for important things. I took a breath and started reading. Danny, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wish I could have said these things to your face, but you know I was never great with words when it came to the important stuff. I want you to know that these last 4 years have been some of the happiest of my life. After your mother passed, I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again. But having you in the workshop, learning the trade, laughing at my terrible jokes, that gave me purpose. You didn't just move home because you needed help. You stayed because you loved the work. Because you loved spending time with your old man. That means more than you'll ever know. My voice cracked. I could hear Linda shifting uncomfortably in her chair. I know Michael probably thinks I'm playing favorites by writing this. But Michael, son, if you're listening, understand this. I love you both equally. I always have. But love doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It means giving each person what they need. You built a good life. You've got a career, a family, stability. I'm proud of that. But Danny needed something different. He needed to remember who he was, what he was capable of. And together, in that workshop, we built something neither of us could have built alone. I had to stop. The words were blurring on the page. Patricia reached across the table and put a box of tissues next to me, then gently took the letter. I can read the rest, she offered. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Patricia continued, her tone professional but not unkind. The letter goes on to explain that Danny has been paying the business loan for 18 months, a total of $47,000 so far, without asking for repayment. Your father wanted Michael to know that. He also wanted both of you to understand his final wishes. Michael's face had gone pale. $47,000? I never wanted Dad to know I was struggling with it, I said quietly. The business was his legacy. I couldn't let it fail. Patricia opened the will itself. Here's what your father decided. The house and personal effects are to be divided equally between both sons. However, the furniture business, including all equipment, client relationships, and the workshop itself, goes entirely to Danny, along with the responsibility for the remaining debt. Wait, Linda said, her voice sharp. So Danny gets a $470,000 asset,
And Michael gets half of a $420,000 house? That's $210,000. How is that fair? Because it's not a $470,000 asset, Patricia said calmly. It's a $290,000 asset with an $180,000 debt attached. And it only has value if someone runs it. The business has no value without the craftsman. Your father was very clear about that. The furniture business dies the day it's sold. The client list, the reputation, the custom work, all of that requires someone who knows the craft and cares about quality. Michael's jaw was tight. So Danny gets the business because he was living there. That's convenient.
No,
Patricia said, and her voice had an edge now.
Danny gets the business because for 4 years he's been your father's partner, because he learned the trade, because he has relationships with every client, because when your father's hands started shaking too badly to do detail work, Danny was there finishing the pieces. Your father kept detailed records. He showed me order forms, customer testimonials, tax documents. For the last 2 years, Danny has completed approximately 70% of the actual work, while your father handled design and client consultations. She pulled out a stack of papers. Your father also kept a journal. He asked me to share one entry with you if there were any disputes. This is from 8 months ago. Patricia read from the journal, and suddenly it was like Dad was in the room. Michael stopped by the workshop today, brought the grandkids. They're good kids, but Michael barely looked at what we were working on.
He was checking his email the whole time, talking about some deal at work. When I tried to show him a joint we'd perfected, he just patted my shoulder and said, "That's great, Dad." But he didn't see it. He didn't see the beauty in it. Danny, though, Danny sees it. Yesterday we delivered a rocking chair to a woman whose husband had died. She sat in it and cried, said it reminded her of one her grandmother owned. Danny teared up too. He understands that what we make isn't just furniture. It's memories. It's love made solid. That's why the business has to go to him. Not because I love Michael less, but because Danny is the only one who can keep it alive. The room was silent. Michael was staring at the table, his face unreadable. Linda had stopped looking at her phone. Patricia closed the journal. Your father understood this would be complicated, so he included one additional provision. Danny, you can refuse the inheritance.
If you do, the business will be liquidated. All assets will be split equally after debts are paid, and that will be that. Your father gave you an out. He said, and I quote, "Danny might not want the burden. The business is hard work and not much money. If he wants to walk away, I understand. No one should be chained to someone else's dream." She looked at me. The choice is yours. You have 48 hours to decide. If you accept, you become sole owner of the business and assume the debt. If you refuse, everything gets sold and split. But before we continue, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments. Let me know where this story is reaching you tonight. Michael stood up abruptly. We need to talk. Danny, outside, now. We left Patricia's office and stood in the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Dad would have loved that sky. He always said the best time to stain wood was in natural evening light.
$47,000, Michael said. His voice wasn't angry, exactly. It was something else. Confused, maybe. Hurt. Why didn't you tell me? Because you made it pretty clear that I was a failure living off Dad's charity. Michael flinched. I was frustrated. I thought you were taking advantage of him.
I know what you thought. You thought I'd given up, that I was hiding at Dad's house because I couldn't face the real world. Were you? The question hung in the air between us. It was fair, I had to admit. At first, maybe, I said. The divorce destroyed me, Michael. 30 years of marriage, gone. The business I'd built from nothing, bankrupt. I was 60 years old and I had nothing. I felt like a failure. So, yeah, when Dad offered me a place to stay, part of me was hiding. Bud? But then something happened. I started learning from him, really learning, not just helping out. And I realized I was good at it. I had a talent I never knew existed.
Dad used to say that every piece of wood has a story. You just have to know how to listen. I learned to listen, Michael. And somewhere in that workshop, making things with my hands, creating something beautiful and permanent, I stopped feeling like a failure. Michael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Did Dad ever say anything about me? About why he didn't leave me the business? You really want to know? Yeah, I do. I thought about all the conversations Dad and I had shared in the workshop, the quiet moments between the sound of sanders and saws. He said you were successful, that you'd built a life he was proud of. But he also said you were too busy to need him anymore. That's not criticism, Michael. That's just fact. You've got your career, your family. You're doing great. But I needed Dad, and he needed to be needed. We gave each other that. Michael rubbed his face with both hands. Linda's going to push for the sale. She's already talking to her lawyer friend about contesting the will. I know. And she might have a case. Undue influence, they call it. You were living with him, taking care of him. A judge might see that as manipulation. Is that what you think? He looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time in years. No, that's not what I think. I think Dad knew exactly what he was doing. I think he was smarter than both of us. So what do we do? I don't know, Danny. I honestly don't know. Michael left with Linda, promising to call in the morning. I drove back to Dad's house. My house now, I guess. The workshop light was still on. I'd forgotten to turn it off after the funeral. I walked inside and stood there, breathing in the familiar smell of sawdust and wood stain. Half-finished projects lined the walls. Orders waiting to be completed. David's tools hanging in their specific places, organized exactly the way he'd arranged them 40 years ago when he first opened the business. On the workbench was the project we'd been finishing the night before he died. A jewelry box, commissioned by a man for his wife's 50th birthday. It was almost done. Just needed the final coat of finish and the felt lining inside. I picked up Dad's favorite brush, the one with the worn handle that fit perfectly in his hand. In mine too, I realized. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the number was local. Unknown. Hello? Danny, this is Patricia Morrison. I know it's late, but I felt I should tell you something your father asked me not to include in the formal meeting. He said if you seemed like you were leaning toward keeping the business, I should give you this information. What information? The debt. The $180,000 loan.
I paid attention to how you reacted during the meeting, and you seemed genuinely unaware of something. Did you know your father had been depositing money into a separate account for the last 3 years? What? No. What account? He called it the succession account. Every time the business made a profit, he put aside a percentage. He has $95,000 saved. It's designated specifically for Daniel Robert Thompson to be used exclusively for paying down business debt. I had to sit down. $95,000? He wanted you to have a fighting chance. With that cushion, you're really only inheriting $85,000 in debt, and the business has been consistently profitable enough to handle those payments. He planned for this, Danny. He planned for you. I couldn't speak. Tears were running down my face. There's one more thing, Patricia said. He left a video message. He recorded it 6 months ago when he revised the will. I can email you the link, or if you prefer, you can come to my office tomorrow and watch it on my computer. Some people find it easier to have company for this kind of thing. Send me the link, I managed to say. I want to watch it here, in the workshop. The email came through 10 minutes later. I set up my laptop on the workbench right next to Dad's coffee mug, still sitting where he'd left it that last morning. I clicked the video. Dad appeared on screen, sitting in his favorite chair in the living room. He looked thin, older than I'd let myself notice when he was alive, but his eyes were clear. Hey, Danny. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you're probably confused and maybe a little angry at me for making things complicated. Your brother's probably angry too. So let me explain some things. First, about Michael. I love that boy. But Michael and we were never as close as you and I got to be these last few years. That's nobody's fault. It's just how it is. He had his mother's drive, her ambition. I was proud of that. But it meant he didn't need me the way you did. And that's okay. Different kids need different things from their parents at different times. You needed purpose, Danny. After everything fell apart, you needed to remember that you were capable of creating something meaningful. So I gave you that opportunity, and you ran with it. You exceeded every hope I had. The business is better now than it's been in 20 years, and that's because of you. But here's what I really want you to understand. This isn't about money or property or being fair according to some formula. This is about legacy. The furniture business isn't just a business. It's a way of seeing the world. It's about taking raw materials and transforming them into something that will last, something that will be part of someone's life story. That rocking chair you made for the woman whose husband died, that'll be passed down to her kids, maybe her grandkids. Long after we're both gone, that chair will still be there, solid and beautiful, telling the story of the craftsman who cared enough to get every detail right. That's what I want you to carry forward. Not because you owe me something, but because you're good at it, and because the world needs more things made with care and intention. Now, about the money situation. I know Michael's going to be upset about the inheritance structure. I know Linda's going to have questions about fairness. So here's what I want you to do. I'm leaving you a cushion, enough money to make the debt manageable. But I'm also giving you a choice. If you decide this isn't what you want, that's fine. Sell everything, split it with Michael, and go do something else. No guilt, no obligation. You've already given me more than I had any right to ask for. But if you keep the business, I want you to make Michael a deal. Offer him a percentage of the profits. Not half, because he's not doing half the work, but something fair. Say, 20% of annual net profits for the next 10 years. That way, he's invested in your success, and you're acknowledging that he's family and deserves to benefit from what I built, even if he's not the one running it. I never put that in the will because I wanted it to be your choice. If you offer it freely, it means something. If I forced it, it's just a transaction. One last thing, son. Don't let anybody make you feel guilty for accepting what I'm giving you. Not Michael, not Linda, not anyone. You earned this. You showed up. You learned. You cared. That's worth more than money could ever buy. I love you, Danny. I'm proud of you. Build beautiful things. Live a good life. And when you're sanding down a piece of cherry wood, think of your old man and smile. Goodbye, son. The video ended. I sat there in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and unfinished projects and Dad's tools, and I cried like I hadn't cried in years. The next morning I called Michael. I'm taking the business, I said, but I want to offer you something Dad would have wanted. I explained the profit-sharing idea. Michael was quiet for a long time. You don't have to do that, he finally said. I know. But Dad left me the choice, and this feels right. You're my brother. This business exists because of Dad, and he was your father too. You should benefit from it. Linda's not going to like this. I'm not offering it to Linda. I'm offering it to you. What do you want, Michael? Not what makes financial sense, not what your wife thinks is fair. What do you want? Another long silence. Then, I want to try. I want to come by the workshop sometime. Learn a little about what you and Dad did. I won't be any good at it, but I'd like to try. You'd do that? I never understood why Dad loved it so much. But that video you sent me last night, the one Patricia said we should both watch, I watched it 3 times. And I realized I never really knew Dad. Not the way you got to know him. I'd like to change that, even if it's too late. It's not too late, I said. Come by this weekend. We'll start with something simple. Dad always said the best way to understand woodworking is to make something with your hands. 3 months later, I'm standing in the workshop, finishing a dining table for a couple celebrating their 40th anniversary. The business is stable, growing even. I've hired a part-time apprentice, a kid fresh out of trade school who reminds me of myself at his age, eager, talented, hungry to learn. Michael comes by most Saturdays now. He's not very good at woodworking, and he knows it, but he shows up and we talk while we work. He's told me things about his life, his struggles, his fears, that I never knew before. We're building a relationship that was broken for 20 years, and it turns out that takes patience and care, just like building furniture. Linda still thinks I manipulated Dad. She's made her opinion clear at family gatherings. But Michael stops trying to defend me to her. He's just decided that this is how things are, and he's chosen to be part of it. Last week, we completed a project I'd been dreading. A client had commissioned a custom rocking chair and specifically requested that it be built in the style of that master craftsman Thompson, who used to make the most beautiful pieces. They didn't know Dad had died. When I told them, they paused and then asked, "But can you still make it?" I looked at Michael, who was sanding down a small jewelry box he'd been working on for his daughter. He looked up and nodded. "Yeah," I told the client. "I can make it. It'll be true to his style, but with my own touch. That's how this works. Legacy isn't about copying what came before. It's about building on it, adding your own voice while honoring the foundation." When I hung up, Michael said, "Dad would have liked that answer." You think so? I know so. He used to say something similar about raising kids, that it wasn't about making us into copies of him, but about giving us the tools to become our own version of good. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. He had sawdust in his hair and a slight burn on his thumb from handling a piece of wood before it had cooled from the stain process. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years. "We should finish that jewelry box today," I said. "Your daughter's birthday is next week. Think I can actually complete something without you fixing it?" Only one way to find out. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, the way Dad and I used to, and I realized that Dad had given me more than a business. He'd given me a way to reconnect with my brother, a common language, a shared purpose. That night I sat in the same chair where Dad had recorded his video message. I thought about everything that had happened since that day in Patricia's office, the day the lawyer read one sentence that changed everything. The sentence wasn't about money or property. It was simpler than that. Dad had written, "I trust Danny to do the right thing, even when it's hard." He trusted me. After everything I'd failed at, all the ways I'd stumbled, he'd trusted me to carry forward something he loved. And in doing that, he'd given me back my confidence, my sense of purpose, my relationship with my brother. I never wanted Dad's money. I wanted what he gave me in those last 4 years. The knowledge that I mattered, that I was capable, that I could create something meaningful with my own hands. The furniture business isn't worth $470,000 or $290,000 or any number you could put on paper. It's worth the relationship I rebuilt with my brother. It's worth the smile on a client's face when they see a custom piece for the first time. It's worth the feeling I get when I finish a project and know that Dad would have been proud. People always talk about inheritance like it's about money. But real inheritance is about passing down the things that can't be measured in dollars. It's about values, skills, love, purpose. It's about knowing the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can give them. Dad knew the difference. And in his final act, he made sure both his sons understood it too. If you're still watching, thank you for letting me share this story. It's been cathartic to tell it. And if you're going through something similar, if you're trying to figure out what matters when someone you love is gone, I hope this helps.
Share this story if it resonated with you. Comment below with your thoughts. And remember, the best inheritance isn't what someone leaves you. It's what they teach you about living well and loving deeply while they're still here. That's the legacy worth fighting for. That's what Dad really left me. And that's what I'm going to pass on to the next generation. One carefully crafted piece at a time.